Hi, I'm Alena. Welcome to my kitchen. Many people today are becoming more and more concerned about the safety and reliability of their source of food. And they've turned to growing at least part of what they eat, preserving what they grow, and even baking bread. These skills were very common to our grandmothers, but seem somewhat foreign to us today. So, where do you go for information? And where do you keep all that information once you do gather it? That's exactly why I have designed my book, The Prepared Homemaker. So I've designed this as part book, part journal. And the first section we have is called Grow. Whether you plant just a few tomatoes on your front porch or you have a great big garden, you'll want to write down what you grow. Another thing you'll want to record is our plant hardiness zone, elevation, approximate first frost date and last frost date, and that will make a difference in both gardening and canning. So here I've got some little notes that I've taken. I've got one that's called Wish List. So sometime this winter I wrote down what things that I really wanted to plant. Things like I wanted to do some husk tomatoes, and I wanted to do some canning tomatoes and lots of varieties of peppers. So I have other things written here, and then I wrote down that I want some flowers on my back patio and just some ideas. Then I have here what we planted in 2014. And that year we planted 11 fruit trees. And I have written here that we have these different varieties of apples and pears and berries. And then on the other side I have a graph paper, and it shows where each one of those trees was planted. And of course this isn't drawn to scale, but I know when I look there I know exactly where those trees are located in my yard. This year I've got a page here for 2016, and I've written down what kinds of tomatoes that we planted, the kinds of peppers, eggplant, tomatillos, cucumbers, the herbs that we planted. And then on the back of this one, I have a little diagram of my grow boxes. We just have a small place here. We have about a half an acre, and so I have everything in grow boxes so that I can plant more intensely. And so I put here in front of the barn, I put these things and so forth. These are my different grow boxes. Why is that important? Well, because the first year we planted in this spot, we planted some squash and some cucumbers and so forth. And it's good to rotate your crops. So one year you do one thing, and the next year we planted tomatoes and peppers in that spot. And then this year I have strawberries and pole beans. So that's called crop rotation. Now next year I can plant what I planted the first year, and that was the winter squash and cucumbers. So that way I can keep track of what I've grown each year in those places, and I can make sure to rotate. The next section is preserve. Here I have step-by-step instructions for preserving food, whether it's by canning, freezing, or dehydrating. I won't tell you all what's in here, but let me just tell you that you don't want to be using old methods. And so there's a lot of information about that. Some charts here on what kind of apples are best for what, and charts and graphs and all kinds of stuff here. The next section is record. You know, it's good to have a place to write things down, what we've done. And so, for example, I have last year's canning written here, 2015. And I have written here that I planted 32 tomato plants, and I ended up with 44 quarts and 24 pints of tomatoes. This year, when I looked at what I have left, I said, you know, I don't need to can very many more quarts. I really don't need probably any more quarts, maybe a few pints. And then I also want to do, so then last year I also did like 12 quarts of pears and peaches and apples and corn and so forth. So it's a good place to write things down, and then you can go back and say, do I want to do the same amount this year? There's also a place to write down, like if we, like for example, we bought peaches. I can put the price that I paid for those peaches, and maybe even where we purchased those peaches, so that we can compare for next year. The next section is called Enjoy, and that's a place where you can write down how you like to use those things that you've preserved. So, for example, my applesauce page. Applesauce cake, and where I find that is my recipe box. And I sometimes put applesauce in my no oil bread, and I also have where I find that recipe. Tomatoes, I have listed lentil soup, and I use quarts for my lentil soup. I use 1 quart per batch of lentil soup. I also have tortilla soup written there, and I have written pint by that because I need just 1 pint of tomatoes for that recipe. It's a good way to jog your memory. If you're looking for a quick meal, you know you have tomatoes on hand, you know what you can make with those. And also it's a good way to plan for next year. The next section is maintain. It's a good place to write down and plan out those seasonal tasks that we don't always think about. I have written in my seasonal calendar here that when I like to spray my fruit trees with the dormant spray, when I like to make sure that the rototiller and the lawnmower are winterized and things like that. So it's just a good place to keep track of all those things. Bake is the next section. Here I've included some basic bread recipes as well as a troubleshooting guide and a couple of charts, one on yeast equivalents, whether you have fresh yeast and but your recipe calls for dry active yeast, those kinds of things. And also how much bread dough should go in a certain size of bread pan. More and more people are becoming gluten sensitive and no longer able to enjoy things like bread, pancakes, waffles, pizza dough, flour tortillas, when in reality it may not be the gluten that they're sensitive to, but the structure that has changed. The gluten structure has actually been changed in modern farming practices. We have a heritage grain called red fife wheat that many people who are gluten sensitive can eat because it is a heritage grain. It hasn't been altered, it has not been changed with the plant breeding and chemicals and so forth that is very common today. So I have some information about that. We have that wheat available on my website, alenaskitchen.com. The last section in the book is cook. This section is primarily left blank because I'll be giving cooking schools on whole food, plant-based nutrition. This will be a place where you can put your handouts. There'll be also, on my website, I'll be posting from time to time some recipes that you'll want to print off and place in your book. Now the reason that I put this in a junior-sized 3-ring binder is that I really want you to be able to personalize this. I want you to be able to write in it, and I like to use colored pens and sticky notes, and there's all kinds of things available at office supply stores and online that can be little accessories if you find something that you really want to put in here. I've already put here, I've got a little plastic pocket thing, but I have all my plant tags from the flowers that I planted on my patio this year. And next year I can look through and say, yeah, that flower really did well, I want to do some more of that. It's just a good way to jog my memory. I don't think I'll probably always keep those flower tags, but for right now I like to hang on to them for a bit. So I hope that you'll order my Prepared Homemaker journal on my website, alenaskitchen.com. Thanks for stopping by.